Welcome back to the Weather Center, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me. It is March 6th, 2024. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a bit to discuss today, so we're going to skip the formalities and just jump right into the video. If you like what you see, like and share this content. We have a lot of information to pass along, and I want it to spread to as many folks as possible, especially as we prepare for this next round of large-scale, widespread potential severe weather threats spanning from the Great Plains, the central southern plains, all the way through the Gulf Coast and the southeast as our next major storm system unfolds. Please consider subscribing as well. Click that notification bell so you do not miss any future updates regardless of the time of year. We are year-round. We have lots of updates unfolding over the next 48 to 72 hours as we prepare for this situation to unfold. So with that being said, guys, fasten your seatbelts. Let's get right in here. All right, so this is our severe weather outlook for Thursday, and as you can see, we have quite an expansive area of level 1 and level 2 risks all across Oklahoma, parts of Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas. Majority of interior and central Texas is highlighted for a major threat for severe, and I'm 100% in agreement with this. When I show you the simulated reflectivity and our large-scale synoptic mechanisms that is driving this threat for widespread thunderstorm coverage, it'll make a lot more sense. Moving over to Friday, March 8th, once again, 100% in agreement with what Storm Prediction Center has highlighted here. We're going to have a very boisterous shear and warm conveyor component associated with the leading edge of this system. When I bring you over to the Theta E chart later into this weather brief, it'll make a lot more sense. I can specifically highlight the quadrant where we will see most of our severe weather action, where we will likely see damaging wind, hail, a somewhat elevated tornado risk as well with this previous system that has pushed through and is continuing to leave lingering effects here in the Sunshine State. We don't have as much of a mid to upper level shear component with it, which is why hail and strong winds were our primary threat source when it came to this previous system that moved through. But with this one, it's going to be a whole different beast. We are going to have a good 850, 700 millibar wind component with lots of good dry and cold air advection back behind it and a very boisterous maritime tropical air mass out ahead of it to create a little bit of contention between the two battling air masses. Now, I'm very grateful for this, folks. This is our day 4 threat for Saturday, March 9th. We now have Mobile, Alabama, the Pensacola, Apalachicola area, Panama City, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, and the southern half of Georgia State highlighted for a severe risk. We have our 15% threshold. This is the lowest but the most elevated risk we can put out at this day 4 range according to SPC's charts, which means they do have a fair bit of confidence we are going to see some severe weather in this quadrant of the United States, this area, this geographic region of the southeast, which makes 100% sense. I mentioned this yesterday in my live briefing. I mentioned this on TikTok. I was a little leery as to why they discontinued this highlighting for their previous day 5 indication, and I'm very, very thankful that they brought it back because it just makes a lot of sense. We are going to see a continuation of our severe weather activity continue to propagate off to the east. We may even see it try to expand into the Carolinas, to be determined. I would not be surprised if we get a day 3 chart tomorrow morning, we have at least a level 1 risk for parts of South Carolina trying to reach its way into North Carolina, but to be determined, folks. We're coming on over to our experimental SIPS model, and as you can see, it lines up very, very well with what Storm Prediction Center is highlighting, and the threats continue to go up in terms of all of our severe thresholds available to us on this experimental model. This is going to be valid for day 2, approximately 48 hours from now. This is that Thursday outlook. I'll switch over to Friday, and you can see still a very, very scattered and expansive area of potential severe weather coverage. And don't be too fixated on just strictly severe, folks. That's another thing I really want us to get away from. Just because we don't have a spectacular tornadic show with these storm systems does not mean there isn't a sensible weather threat to your local area. We still have to keep in mind that the hail, the winds associated with these features, and the possibility of localized heavy rainfall that could induce some flooding in lower-lying areas across roadways, intersection streets, your neighborhood. These are very credible threats, and we want to make sure we pay attention to that as well. Moderate-level threats, to include 35, 40-knot gusts, can still do some considerable noticeable damage to your area. We want to watch for that flash flood potential, which does exist. We did have that previously occur with this system that has been making its way through over the last 24 hours. And then finally, moving on to day 4, as you can see here, the SIPS model has only continued to elevate this threshold. 2 days prior, when I was looking at this, we had a large margin of 10% risk, a 15% risk, also highlighted for much of Alabama, Georgia, and the northern periphery of Florida, particularly the Panhandle. Yesterday, if you noticed on my TikTok, if you follow me on that social media platform, we had a smaller bubble of a 30 percentile risk for the Florida Panhandle, parts of Georgia. Now you can see that the 30 percentile has increased in size, which means our experimental SIPS model here is only continuing to build confidence as well that our multitude of severe weather threats continues to go up, hail, winds, tornadoes alike. Now, before we go any further into the future and continue to forecast for this large-scale entity that is likely to sweep through across much of the eastern United States altogether, we'll talk a little bit about our Central Plains, Midwest, Great Lakes impacts here in a moment. I also want to highlight this continued threat for potential severe weather, if not significant weather action down here in Florida and the rest of the Southeast. This is a look at our HRRR composite reflectivity model, valid now as I'm shooting this video. Unfortunately, it looks like a lot of the main event activity we are expecting later this afternoon will have likely already started, if not concluded, by the time this video goes out. I may release it a little bit earlier, to be determined. Once again, one of my new favorite catchphrases, especially with the anomalies that are involved with shooting these videos for you guys. As I quickly take you through time, you can see just off the eastern Gulf of Mexico, off the west coast of Florida, we are expecting another line of post-frontal or post-trough activity, however you want to describe it, on the tailing end of this system. We are looking at some widespread convection that's expected to unfold over central Florida, South Florida, and I'm thinking Palm Beach, Homestead, Miami area really needs to pay close attention to this. Boca Raton, Boynton Beach areas, Stuart, Florida, very infamous for our tornado threat as we've gone through this El Nino-style winter, and it looks like the Four Corners area, Sumter County, Orange County, Osceola, and Polk County could have some pretty good activity moving through as we go through max heating of the day. Sometime between 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when we're going to have that convective initiation, and then as we continue to go throughout the day, it's only going to get a little bit worse. Once we meet the East Coast and we get a little bit of that Gulf Stream water enhancement, we're also going to see some strengthening of our storms as we get just beyond sunset between the 7-8 p.m. time frame. So this is going to be an extended event, and I noticed on the SIPs, if I were to rewind for you guys, the SIPs actually has us bullseyed for a 15% risk of some severe weather coverage and a 2% chance that there will be some tornadic activity embedded with this, so we can't take our eyes off the monitor just yet, even though we are building up to this momentous event, I think, over the weekend. We also have to watch up in Georgia, South Carolina, some post-frontal, some post-system is what I'll call them. Discrete cells could pop up through central Georgia, propagating into South Carolina. Some of these could go moderate to severe. We could have some 35, 40 knot gusts out of these storms, some light hail. I don't believe we're going to have much of a tornadic risk up into this part of the Southeast, especially as we get further and further away from our shear component. I'll use my pen here to highlight this. Out ahead of this system, right in through here, is where most of our good 850 to 700 millibar flow is. This is probably going to be residual Cape surface-based instability that's going to help to pop off these daytime thunderstorms. So I would not be surprised if we got some very good wind, if not some good heavy rainfall for some localized areas in Georgia, South Carolina, and some light to moderate hail. And when I say light to moderate, I mean 1/4 inch to 3/4 inch size hailstones falling out of these systems. We might not have multi-trip hail, very large hail, to induce a severe thunderstorm warning with these systems, but again, anything is possible, folks. We have a lot of good springtime-like buoyancy and warm advection that's going to help to fuel these thunderstorms, bring these updrafts into full potential to produce hail, very good winds, and a lot of frequent cloud-to-ground lightning, as we saw yesterday. If you tuned in for my live storm chase, lots of wonderful lightning strikes out there. Probably releasing a compilation of those later on this afternoon, but we'll continue to monitor this as we go throughout the day. All right, so here are our areas in question. This is 12 hours after the 0Z European model has initialized. There's our major storm system moving off the southeast into the mid-Atlantic over the Appalachians. That is going to be driving our thunderstorm threat throughout the day today, and a very heavy rain threat as well up the eastern seaboard. Large areas expecting between 2 to 3 inches of rainfall with this system as it continues to expand in size. Not looking at much in the way of very good snowfall. We just have too much warm air out there. We might see some wintry precip in the uppermost northeast, especially into parts of Maine where that 540 thickness line and that freezing line exist currently. We could see a little bit of a southward tug with that as this system continues to deepen down before finally pushing off the east coast into the eastern provinces of Canada, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, the easternmost tip of Quebec, and then exiting off our shore completely. And then before you turn your gaze back towards the Central Plains, we already have cyclogenesis occurring. You can see the European model at 0Z is a little bit more aggressive with this cyclogenesis as well. It does seem like we're going to have a bit more of a polar plunge along the backside of this, which means we're only going to see an increase in the frontogenesis, the strength of the cold front associated with this system, which is only going to instigate even greater convective activity over the south and southeast. Dixie Alley really needs to watch out for a severe weather potential, and because of this strengthening high pressure that's moving down towards the south and eventually the southeast, here's your low. If I were to do a very brief synoptic analysis, it looks like our front is manifesting itself right in through here along the leading edge of this pressure gradient, the pressure trough to the south of our low center of circulation. Look at all this precursor thunderstorm activity that's expected to form up in the warm sector of this system. And again, guys, it's going to make a lot more sense once we get to the theta E, but regardless, as we go through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe even a slight continuation into very early Sunday morning, we really need to pay close attention to our radars, to our weather advisories, watches, warnings that come out from our National Weather Service agencies, because we're in for a very busy next couple of days. On the left-hand side, we have our surface-based cape, and on the right-hand side, we have our 850 millibar flow. I'll take you through these parameters as well. What's very astonishing is despite all the rainfall activity and the cloud cover that we're waking up to here in Florida this morning, we actually have a lot of good low-level buoyancy still left over for these thunderstorms to activate with. And if you look on the right-hand side, we have about 20 to 25 knots of 850 millibar shear, and this only continues to increase once you get up to 500 and 300 millibars. So the threat for strong winds and likely small to moderate hail with these storms as they pop off today, and that low-end tornado risk for south and southeast Florida is present. So we definitely want to keep a close eye on what happens over the next 6 to 12 hours through our neck of the woods here in the southeast, especially Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. And as we move through time, notice immediately we have a much more established warm conveyor coming out of the south central Gulf of Mexico, the western Gulf altogether, funneling up to the north over eastern Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, getting into Missouri, eastern half of Oklahoma, Kansas. We could see an even greater threat for severe weather. And in response to that warm conveyor, if you glance back to our left-hand side chart, the Cape values begin to go up, indicative of that warm, moist advection that's occurring with that warm sector of the system. And I'm going to quickly fast forward, and as you watch and track this through time, our Cape values don't seem to diminish very much. And we also have to take into equation we have our most unstable Cape and our mixing layer Cape that is not pictured here, that is also going to play a role in how these systems unfold, how this situation unfolds, because we have a combination of daytime diurnal enhancement, which essentially means daytime heating, the sunshine, the moisture entrained in the low levels of the atmosphere, our residual moisture that's still lingering from our previous thunderstorm threat that happened yesterday and this morning is going to be available for this system to tap into. And we have a large-scale synoptic driver, the jet aloft, vorticity at 500 millibars, and obviously our cold front, our cold dry air back behind the front, that surface high pressure that's forcing the cold dry air over this area of warm moist air. So we have multiple different triggers and instigators that could really help to pop off widespread thunderstorm coverage. That's why I have my eyes on this, and I've had my eyes on this for a while now. And I'll hold the chart right here. This is 12 Zulu Saturday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for us here in the south and southeast. You can see already a night and day difference in our warm conveyor out ahead of this system. It's not the most impressive shear component as we've seen with previous systems during the greater winter time, the heart of the winter season, but our Cape is definitely there through Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and especially the Florida Panhandle. I think our tornado risk is going to be very elevated for parts of southern Alabama, Georgia, and especially the Florida Panhandle, where we had that previous outbreak early January with our last system. And the shear component is definitely there, folks. This is actually more of an optimal range of mid to upper level shear. If you ask me, we have between 34 to about 46 knots with a little bit of embedded higher land areas in central Georgia and southwestern South Carolina. So this is definitely an optimal environment for the works, as I like to call it. A nice combination of good hail, strong damaging winds depending on what our downdraft or our D-Cape looks like, and the tornado risk is going to be greater with this system as opposed to what's happening currently. Here's a quick glance at the RRFs, the RRFS model. We're just going to very quickly go through this, and you can see there's our heavy rain threat for the eastern seaboard with that convective activity finally diminishing as we go very early morning hours of Thursday. We'll finally see that thunderstorm risk come to an end for us to the southeast, Georgia, South Carolina, and the Florida Peninsula. But then immediately after that, as we start the day on Thursday and the sun begins to come up, we're already looking at widespread potential thunderstorm activity. So we could very well see initiation early in the morning and start seeing those WWAs, watches, warnings, and advisories, kicking off as we're waking up to start the workday on Thursday. And don't look now, but there is also a potential for some snow through the Dakotas, Nebraska, and especially the front range of Colorado as that polar air comes down along the backside of this system. So we'll have to watch for a freezing rain, heavy snow threat as we go through Nebraska, parts of northern Kansas. It looks like areas of Iowa and southern Minnesota could also see some potential wintry precip, freezing rain, icing associated with this low as it deepens down. This is as far out as we'll go. This is 12 Zulu starting the day on Friday. Sunrise, mixed area of very good thunderstorm activity from Missouri through Arkansas, the southeastern tip of Oklahoma, and eastern Texas we'll have to be monitoring. Just so I don't keep you guys any longer in this video, I wanted to make it short and sweet so I can get through the editing process fairly quickly and get this up for you guys. I'm going to leave this static image of our 6 Zulu GFS. This is going to be our 850 millibar Theta E. And the reason I have this up is because this right in through here, the warm sector as we like to describe it, if you ever hear meteorologists, including myself, describing a setup in terms of there's our warm sector where our thunderstorm and heavy rain, wind, tornadic activity could likely occur, this is what I'm talking about. If you look at these values, here's our cold front. You can clearly see the northerly flow transitioning to a northwesterly flow back behind this system, and here's our very, very gratuitous southerly flow out ahead of it, and notice how our Theta E values suddenly surge into the yellow, the orange, and the reds. This is a wonderful tool I used to love using during my time as a synoptic analyst in the United States Air Force, and I will continue to do so in the naval component as well. So these magenta, purple, pinkish colors moving into the blue, the light blue, and the green, that's your drier, cooler air, indicative of our modifying polar air mass coming across the Great Plains. And then down here is going to be our maritime tropical air, and right along this leading edge is where we're going to have some pretty gratuitous thunderstorm activity, and anywhere inside this warm sector is where your most buoyant air is likely to be, your greatest level of instability. So it's fair game if you exist in this quadrant of the storm. And if I erase the ink and kind of draw where this area is likely to proceed, anywhere in this general threshold right there. I know we have fast forwarded. This is on Saturday morning as the main event gets ready to kick off for the extreme southeast U.S., but anywhere within this box that I've drawn, you have a good threat for severe weather in your area. And then last but not least, before we wrap this video, throughout the day today, we still have some supercell parameters coming together over Florida and southeastern Georgia, South Carolina that we'll need to watch for. And then very quickly, as we start to see the main event of our next system unfold, those supercell parameters come back. So southern Louisiana, eastern Texas, parts of Mississippi, definitely getting into the Florida Panhandle and Alabama, where you can see that threshold does kind of go up a little bit more so. I'll try to hold the time there. This is 18Z on Saturday. Max heating of the day, we have some very good supercell parameters for the Florida Panhandle, eastern central Alabama, and Georgia that we'll need to watch too, with a little bit of stray occurrences actually into Kentucky and Tennessee. So we'll definitely need to see if we have at least a level 1 risk highlighted by Storm Prediction Center as we get into this weekend for a threat for some marginal severe weather activity up as far into the mid-Atlantic Appalachian region with this system. So as you can see, guys, in summary, as we close out this video, first and foremost, formalities. Once again, please like and definitely share this video if you liked what you saw. I know this was a very fast-paced forecast, guys, but I wasn't going to skip making a video today. I wanted to cover as many details in a short period of time as possible. Follow me on my TikTok, my X, and my Instagram for more routine updates that I can pump on a more regular, recurring basis for you guys day to day, as opposed to these heavily lengthy YouTube videos that I have to put a little more time into. But regardless, as we go through Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and into the very early periphery of Sunday, we really need to keep our eyes open for this system as it continues to develop and move further off to the east, because we have a lot of potential severe weather associated with it that could impact a large majority of us who live in the deep south, the Gulf Coast states, and the southeast, and maybe even up the mid-Atlantic region as well. So we are in for a very, very busy marathon-style look for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and early Sunday. Thank you once again for being such a marvelous audience, guys. You guys have been phenomenal. We're continuing to slowly grow on this channel, and I know it's self-inflicted that the views and the subscribers have been down a little bit, but it would mean the world to me if we continue to get the word out, spread this wonderful information. I have a lot of great time talking with you guys in the live streams and providing this updated content for you, and I hope we can continue to grow the Weather Center community as we move through the early parts of spring, finally officially close out winter on the calendar, and see what the rest of 2024 has in store for us. Until next time, folks, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.